This morning I'm going to start on a kind of, it'll probably be 2 Sundays. I'm guessing it'll take 2 Sundays to get through it. It's something that I've studied on for a very, very long time, but now I'm ready to actually present it. So I want to talk about the Sabbath and what that is, what that was, what our requirements are relative to it. I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but there was actually a group of Baptists back, they may still exist for all I know, but back in the late 1600s, early 1700s, that were known as the Seventh-day Baptists, who had the idea that it was a requirement that we worship on Saturday, not on Sunday. And out of that group came a group called the Seventh-day Adventists, which also hold to that. And then they've got a whole bunch of other stuff. They hold to all the old dietary rules that were applicable to the Jews and a bunch of other stuff. And if I'm not mistaken, your brother is married to someone that grew up in that mess, right? And I would almost venture a guess that because of running into these folks before, sometimes that's a tough one to get past. You get convinced of that thing, and that could very well be what holds her up from getting in the water. I don't know, but I know we had a member out in Las Vegas, not a member of this church. It was a member of the Las Vegas church that got into the Seventh Day thing and left the church and never came back. So it is something that we need to know what it is in case somebody comes calling. And if you know a Seventh-day Adventist or you're trying to witness to one, it's probably helpful to actually understand what the Sabbath really is and how it applies to us and how we should approach it. So that's the reason. Now there's 3 main views in what we'll call professing Christendom regarding the observance of a Sabbath day. 3 main views. There are those that hold that the 7th-day Sabbath of the 10 Commandments is still in effect and that Christians should observe it unto the Lord as a holy day of rest and worship. And I've just mentioned a couple of them. Seventh-day Adventists are one of those groups, Seventh-day Baptists, and there's probably a bunch of others out there that I don't know. You know, there's a video that I did a long time ago, a sermon that I did on Christmas that has something like, I don't know, 50,000 views or something like that on YouTube. It's the number one watched video on our YouTube channel. And shortly after I did that, I started getting letters from people. And letters and books and pamphlets and on and on and on and on and on about this topic right here. Now, I don't know who these people are, and I don't really care, but there are a bunch of them out there that really hold to this idea that we are still to worship on the Sabbath day and that Sunday worship has no place. Now, so there is a huge, at least it appears to be a huge contingent. I got more mail from them than I've ever gotten from anybody else in my entire life, and this was from all over the country. Along with, like I say, a bunch of pamphlets and books and a whole bunch of other stuff. So from time to time, these things come back around again. It died down, and then all of a sudden it'll pop back up again. My mailbox will fill up with it again. So it does come around. There are those that teach this. Then there are those that hold that the Sabbath day was changed from the 7th day of the week to the 1st day of the week as a commemoration of the revelation of the resurrection of Christ, and that day should be observed as a holy day of rest and worship, and they call Sunday the Christian Sabbath. Well, I don't agree with that one either, and I'll show you why as we go forward. And then there are those like me, and the churches that we fellowship with, that hold that the Sabbath day was a shadow of things to come, that it was fulfilled in the Lord Jesus Christ, and that there is no Sabbath day observance commanded anywhere in the New Testament. In other words, the day of the week doesn't matter. We could have church on Wednesday. If everybody worked and had Wednesday off, there's no reason in the world why the church couldn't meet on a Wednesday. And we'd be fine. The day of the week doesn't really make that much difference. And so that's what I intend to prove in this study. Now, the word Sabbath occurs 146 times in the AV 1611. In the Old Testament, the Hebrew word translated Sabbath is Sabbath, which means intermission. That's the definition of it, intermission. And it's derived from another Hebrew word which means to repose or to rest. In Lamentations chapter 1 and verse 7, the word Sabbaths is translated from Mishbath, which is from Shabbath and means cessation. Okay? So in the New Testament, the Greek word translated Sabbath is Sabbaton, which originates from the Hebrew word that we just defined a few moments ago. And so by definition, a Sabbath is a day of rest or repose, of a cessation from work or labor. That's really all it means. Okay? That's really all it is. That's how as complicated as it is. It's a day of rest. It's a day that you don't work. That's what a Sabbath is. Okay? And now the law of Moses ordained various Sabbath days, not just the weekly Sabbath. Now we've been over this every time I preach on 3 days and 3 nights. We've covered this one, but let's take a look. I want you to look first at Exodus chapter 20 and verse 8. Exodus 20 and verse 8, this is in the 10 Commandments, and it says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. So this is where we first see it. Over in Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 12 through 15, we read, keep the Sabbath day to sanctify it, as the Lord thy God hath commanded thee. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thine ox, nor thine ass, nor any of thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates, that thy manservant and thy maidservant may rest as well as thou. So, in verse 15, and remember that thou wast servant in the land of Egypt, and that the Lord thy God brought thee out thence through a mighty hand and by a stretched out arm. Therefore the Lord thy God commanded thee to keep the Sabbath. So the Sabbath day, and we'll get into this a little bit more as we move on, the Sabbath day was a day where simply you were not allowed to work. Your animals weren't allowed to work. There was an argument, and I wish I could find the quote. I remember reading it. I have the books on my library shelf, but I didn't. This is one I didn't write down when I was reading it. It's a Jewish history, and it goes into some of what went on in the Sanhedrin, where they were debating different things to interpret law with, like our Congress kind of does. Our Congress sits around and they come up with these ideas and talk about them and then pass them, and then the Supreme Court says, yeah, you can't do that, and they throw it out. But the Sanhedrin would have been like both. They would debate things back and forth on on how to interpret the law. And there was one thing that they debated. They didn't get enough votes, but they debated that if a chicken laid an egg on the Sabbath day, that you were not allowed to eat it because it's work for the chicken to lay an egg. They actually, so you see, folks, stupid government has been here since the very beginning of time. The lunacy, and there were so many of these other lunatic points that they would sit around and, you ordain these people and they don't have anything to do. They're going to think up something to do, so and it usually doesn't work well. But this is basically no work. And this was generally, the Sabbath begins Friday night when sun goes down, and it ends Saturday night when the sun goes down. So for that 24-hour period, that's the Sabbath day. Now, but that's not the only Sabbath. There are other Sabbaths that happen throughout the calendar. If you turn to Leviticus chapter 23, and we begin at verse 5. It says, "In the 14th day of the first month at even is the Lord's Passover. And on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto the Lord. 7 days ye must eat unleavened bread. In the first day ye shall have an holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein, but ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord 7 days. In the 7th day is a holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein." So the first day of Passover is a Sabbath. The 7th day is a Sabbath. And if that Sabbath happens to fall on a Monday, well, then you've got your weekly Sabbath on Friday or Saturday. You've got the Passover Sabbath on whatever day of the week it happens to fall on. And then the next week you've got the same kind of thing. So there's many times more than one Sabbath in a week. It's not always that weekly Sabbath. And that's the part that so many people miss when it comes to the crucifixion of Christ, where he said he'd be in the ground 3 days and 3 nights. You can't get 3 days and 3 nights out of Friday afternoon until Sunday morning. The math just doesn't work, unless, again, you're a member of Congress. But it doesn't work. So obviously that Sabbath was in the middle of the week, and he was crucified before. We know he was crucified before Passover. We know they had to get him down off of the cross. So because the Sabbath was coming, otherwise they would have just left him up there. I talked about this out in Las Vegas, and I may have mentioned it here. I don't know how many of you realize that form of death was a lot worse than had it been done on any day other than a Sabbath. You could hang up there for a week before you actually died, and have birds picking you apart. It was a horrible way to die. That was the reason that they broke the legs of the 2 thieves. They had to get them off the cross because of the Passover, because of the Sabbath. Had that not been the case, they would have just left them there until they finally succumbed to their injuries. It was a horrible way to die. Anyway, I'm getting a little far afield here. But so you can have more Sabbaths in a week. There's also one on the first day of the 7th month. Look at Leviticus 23 and verse 24. "Speaking to the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, in the first day of the month, shall ye have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing the trumpets, an holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein, but ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord." There's another one. We have Passover, now we have trumpets. Look at verses 27 through 32. Also on the 10th day of the 7th month, there shall be a day of atonement. It shall be a holy convocation unto you. You shall afflict your souls and offer an offering by fire unto the Lord, and ye shall do no work in that same day, for it is a day of atonement to make an atonement for you before the Lord your God. For whatsoever soul it is that shall not be afflicted in the same day, he shall be cut off from among his people. And whatsoever soul it be that doeth any work in that same day, the same soul will I destroy from among his people. Ye shall do no manner of work. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. It shall be unto you a Sabbath of rest, and ye shall afflict your souls in the 9th day of the month. At even, from even unto even shall you celebrate your Sabbath. So you see there's another one. And then look at verses 39 through 43. Also in the 15th day of the 7th month, when ye have gathered in the fruit of the land, ye shall keep a feast unto the Lord 7 days. On the 1st day shall be a Sabbath, and on the 8th day shall be a Sabbath. And ye shall take you on the 1st day the boughs of goodly trees, branches of palm trees, and the boughs of thick trees and willows of the brook, and ye shall rejoice before the Lord your God 7 days. So you see, there were a multitude of these Sabbaths. It wasn't just on Friday night until Saturday night. They would fall throughout the year. Now, the first month, remember that had changed. It became the first month at the time of the Passover. When God instituted the Passover, he changed the calendar. So it would be like our calendar, kind of like a fiscal year to a certain degree. Our calendar begins in January and ends in December, right? Our nation was founded, or the Declaration of Independence was written on July 4th. So you could say that July 4th would be the first month relative to the nation. Well, that's kind of the way it was here, where the month of Nisan, where it had been farther along in the calendar, at Passover, when God instituted the Passover, that became the first month of the year. And that's generally sometime in mid-April on our calendar. And then the 7th month would fall sometime in late September, early October on our calendar. So those are the two big break-off points. Now, what constituted a day as a Sabbath was the fact that it was a day of rest. Wasn't to be any work done in it. Every 7th year, the land was to keep a Sabbath. That is, the land wasn't to be worked during that entire year. So the land was to rest. Now, this is an agricultural nation. So the year before, you got to stock up, because that 1 year, you just let the land rest. You don't do anything with it. Look at, well, we're already there. Leviticus chapter 23, we'll begin at verse 39. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the wrong place. Leviticus 25, beginning at verse, I know I wrote the wrong one down. There's not 107. Okay, 1 through 7. Leviticus 25. And the Lord spake unto Moses in Mount Sinai, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye come into the land which I give you, then shall the land keep a Sabbath unto the Lord. 6 years thou shalt sow thy field, and 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyard, and gather in the fruit thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. Thou shalt neither sow thy field, nor prune thy vineyard. That which groweth of its own accord of thy harvest thou shalt not reap, neither gather the grapes of thy vine undressed, for it is a year of rest unto the land. And the Sabbath of the land shall be meat for you, for thee, and for thy servant, and for thy maid, and for thy hired servant, and for thy stranger that sojourneth with thee, and for thy cattle, and for the beasts that are in the land shall all the increase thereof be meat. So every 7 years, you're just to let it do its thing, and then at the end of that, go back in and clean it up and start over again, so that the land would rest. So the point I'm trying to make is the Sabbath was not necessarily the seventh day of the week. It was a time of rest. And it didn't matter if it was a day, if it was a year. It didn't matter what day of the week it was on. If it's a Sabbath, it's a Sabbath. And God says to keep his Sabbaths holy. That's all of them. And no work was to be done. We saw in, I believe, Exodus chapter 20 and verse 10. I think we've already looked at that, but let me flip over there and see. Yeah, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son nor thy daughter, thy manservant nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. And in Leviticus chapter 16, beginning at verse 29, and this shall be the statute forever unto you, that in the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, ye shall afflict your souls and do no work at all, whether it be one of your own country or a stranger that sojourneth among you. For on that day shall the priest make an atonement for you to cleanse you, that ye may be clean from all your sins before the Lord. It shall be a Sabbath of rest unto you, and ye shall afflict your souls by a statute forever. So regardless of what day it fell on, if it's a Sabbath, it's a Sabbath. You're not to work, it's a day of rest. Not even a beast of burden was to be worked on that day, which obviously is going to limit your transportation, the distance you can travel, right? Can't jump on your horse and take it for a ride on the Sabbath day. He's got to rest. Don't even put a saddle on him, just leave him out there. Can't hook him to a buggy and go to town with him, because they're not to work. In Exodus chapter 35 and verse 3, ye shall kindle no fire throughout your habitations upon the Sabbath day. You can't even go collect sticks and start a fire on the Sabbath day. You're to rest. In Numbers chapter 15, beginning at verse 32, and while the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man that gathered sticks upon the Sabbath day. And they that found him gathering sticks brought him unto Moses and Aaron and unto all the congregation, and they put him in ward, because it was not declared what should be done to him. And the Lord said unto Moses, the man shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones without the camp. And all the congregation brought him without the camp and stoned him with stones, and he died as the Lord commanded Moses. Pretty serious about this. When this Sabbath was in effect, folks, they were serious about it. Now, here's something that I find interesting among those that teach that we're still under these obligations. They don't take any of this into account. They're jumping in their cars and driving to church I'm sure they're going to restaurants after church. Somebody cooks a meal and doesn't eat cereal. Somebody's doing something that they would have been stoned for if this were still in effect. Because if the Sabbath is still in effect, all the rest of the rules regarding it are still in effect, are they not? And so if I so much as go gather a stick, you got to stone me with stones? See, they like parts of it, and they ignore the parts they don't like. And the penalty was death. We just saw what would happen. Look at Exodus chapter 31. And verse 15. 15. 6 days may work be done, but the seventh is the Sabbath of rest, holy to the Lord. Whosoever doeth any work in the Sabbath day, he shall surely be put to death. Now, here's an interesting one for you. Like with every rule, there is an exception. Guess who gets to work on the Sabbath day? Right? When they would bring their offerings to the house of God on the Sabbath day, somebody had to offer them, and that was the priests. So the priests work on the Sabbath day, but the rest of the folks don't. So there's the exception. And there were a couple of other exceptions. Works of necessity and works of mercy were allowed on that day. Exodus chapter 16. You remember that Jesus was constantly getting in trouble for healing people on the Sabbath day. And that was one of the things that the Jews just couldn't stand about him doing that on the Sabbath day, because you're not supposed to do any work on the Sabbath day, even though they were priests. They were doing work on the Sabbath day, but he wasn't allowed to. In Exodus chapter 16 and verse 25, we read, "And Moses said, Eat that today, for today is a Sabbath unto the Lord. Today ye shall not find it in the field." Now we're talking about the manna. You remember when God started to give manna? He would only give it for 6 days. So on the 6th day you had to collect. Now look at Numbers chapter 28. Beginning at verse 9. "And on the Sabbath day 2 lambs of the first year without spot, and 2 tenths deal of flour for a meat offering mingled with oil, and a drink offering thereof. This is the burnt offering of every Sabbath, beside the continual burnt offering and his drink offering." So these are works of necessity. These are things that had to be done on the Sabbath. There were rules for things that needed to be done. So obviously you can do that. You can obviously do the things that you're supposed to do, but you can't go out and earn a living. You can't go out and do stuff for comfort or pleasure. You're not allowed to do that on the Sabbath. But the work that needed to be done, obviously that can be done. Matthew chapter 12. Beginning at verse 1. "At that time Jesus went on the Sabbath day through the corn, and his disciples were an hungered, and began to pluck the ears of corn and to eat. I think you're allowed to eat. I think you are allowed to eat on the Sabbath day. So it wasn't eating the corn that was a problem. They plucked it off the stalk. I don't know why in the world you'd want to eat raw corn anyway, but I guess they were hungry, you know? I guess if you're hungry enough, you'll eat raw corn. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said unto him, Behold, thy disciples do that which is not lawful to do upon the Sabbath day. Well, it wasn't eating. You're allowed to eat on the Sabbath day, so obviously they're referring to them plucking this stuff off the stalk, right? But he said unto them, Have you not read what David did when he was an hungered, and they that were with him? How he entered into the house of God and did eat the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat, neither for them that were with him, but only for the priests. You remember David was running from Saul, and he went into the tabernacle and they ate the showbread that was there for the priests because they hadn't had anything to eat in a while. Or have you not read in the law how that on the Sabbath days the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are blameless? You see, they're working. The priests in the temple are working. If you're going to draw this kind of line in the sand, you got to go with all of it. So here you are, a priest, working on the Sabbath day, and you say my guys can't even eat a piece of corn? But I say unto you that in this place is one greater than the temple. But if ye had known what this meaneth, I will have mercy and not sacrifice, ye would not have condemned the guiltless. For the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath day. And when he was departed thence, he went into their synagogue, and behold, there was a man which had his hand withered. And they asked him, saying, Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath days, that they might accuse him? And he said unto them, What man shall there be among you that shall have one sheep, and if it fall into a pit on the Sabbath day, will he not lay hold on it and lift it out? How much then is a man better than a sheep? Wherefore it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. You see, if you had a sheep that fell in a pit on the Sabbath day, you were allowed to go get him out of there. Their works of necessity and works of mercy were allowed on the Sabbath day. Look at Mark chapter 3 and verse 4. And he saith unto the man which had the withered hand, Stand forth. And he saith unto him, Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath days, or to do evil, to save life, or kill? But they held their peace. See, they knew that he was well within his rights to do something to help someone on the Sabbath day. Luke chapter 13. Beginning at verse 11. And behold, there was a woman which had a spirit of infirmity 18 years, and was bowed together, and could in no wise lift up herself. And when Jesus saw her, he called her to him, and said unto her, Woman, thou art loosed from thine infirmity. And he laid his hand on her, and immediately she was made straight, and glorified God. And the ruler of the synagogue answered with indignation, because that Jesus had healed on the Sabbath day, and said unto the people, There are 6 days in which men ought to work, and them therefore come and be healed, but not on the Sabbath day. The Lord then answered him and said, Thou hypocrite, doth not each one of you on the Sabbath loose his ox or his ass from the stall, and lead him away to the watering? And ought not this woman, being a daughter of Abraham, who Satan hath bound, lo, these 18 years, be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath day? It was perfectly legal for you to go out there with your animals and feed them. You know, usually oxen don't have little bowls of water in their stall like Gibson does in the house. right? Where he can go drink whenever he wants to. You got to actually lead them out to be able to, that's perfectly fine. So there were some things that you could do. John chapter 7. Beginning at verse 21. Jesus says, and answered and said unto them, I have done one work, and ye all marvel. Moses, therefore, gave unto you circumcision, not because it is of Moses, but of the fathers. And ye on the Sabbath day circumcise a man. See, there's an interesting point. If you have a child, in the Old Testament days, if you had a male child, on the 8th day, he was to be circumcised. What happens if the 8th day happens to fall on a Sabbath? What do? Well, you have him circumcised. And the priests would do that on the Sabbath. They would work on the Sabbath. If a man on the Sabbath day receives circumcision, that the law of Moses should not be broken, are ye angry at me because I have made a man every whit whole on the Sabbath day? Judge not according to the appearance, but judge righteous judgment. So, while you're not to do servile work, remember that word servile work, you were allowed to do works of mercy. You were allowed to help people. Works of necessity were allowed. Convocations or assemblies were commanded to be held on the Sabbath. Back in Leviticus again. Chapter 23. Which I guess we could call the Sabbath chapter. And verse 3 says, 6 days shall work be done, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of rest and holy convocation. Ye shall do no work therein, is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. But you were to present offerings on some of these days. And we already saw that on the Passover, you're to bring a burnt offering on that very day. Okay? And they're to burn it. Look at Nehemiah chapter 8. Nehemiah is in the historical books. It's right after Ezra. Nehemiah chapter 8. And all the people gathered themselves together as one man into the street that was before the water gate, and they spake unto Ezra the scribe to bring the book of the law of Moses, which the Lord had commanded to Israel. And Ezra the priest brought the law before the congregation, both of men and women, and all that could hear with understanding upon the first day of the 7th month. Did you see that? First day of the 7th month. Do you remember what the first day of the 7th month was? A holy convocation unto the Lord. We just read about it over in Leviticus. On the first day of the 7th month. That's the beginning of trumpets. And that is a Sabbath. And all these people are gathering on this Sabbath. And he read therein before the street that was before the water gate from the morning until midday, before the men and the women and those that could understand, and the ears of all the people were attentive unto the book of the law. And Ezra the scribe stood upon a pulpit of wood, which they had made for the purpose, and beside him stood, we'll just skip down here a couple of verses. Verse 5, and Ezra opened the book in the sight of all the people, for he was above all the people. And when he opened it, all the people stood up, and Ezra blessed the Lord and great God the great God. And all the people answered, Amen, Amen, with lifting up their hands. And they bowed their heads and worshiped the Lord with their faces to the ground. So you see what we got going on here? We got a church service going on, and it's going on the Sabbath day, and Ezra's doing some work. And the people are there to worship on this day. Now, Leviticus chapter 23 again. And this time we'll look at verse 24. Leviticus 23:24. And here's the reference that I was referring to. Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, in the 1st day of the month, shall ye have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing the trumpets, a holy convocation. The very same day they were having the church service, the 1st day of the 7th month. Ezra was doing work. The priests were doing work. And gatherings were accepted. That's something else. In Luke chapter 4 and verse 16, and he came to Nazareth, this is speaking of Christ, came to Nazareth where he had been brought up, and as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up for to read. You see, the Sabbath day, that was a day you go to church. So those assemblies were expected. The Jews were to abstain from doing their own ways, from finding their own pleasure, from speaking their own words on the Sabbath day. So you weren't to do any work to make money. You weren't to do any work to have fun. You were to rest from servile work, and you were to do the work of the Lord. Period. End of report. Isaiah chapter 53. And again, I doubt seriously that the Seventh-day Adventists follow that part of the rule. Isaiah 58 and verse 13. If thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord honorable, and shalt honor him not, doing thine own ways, nor finding thine own pleasure, nor speaking thine own words. So that's what you were prohibited from doing. So the law not only gave the obligation to the Jews of the Sabbath, it showed them how to observe the Sabbath. There's more to this, and we're not going to spend time going through all of these little rules, but there's more to it than just simply taking a day off. There were tons of rules involved with the Sabbath day, and the people that teach that we're still underneath that, I don't hear any of those other rules. I don't see anybody being stoned amongst the Sabbath day group if they so much as pick up a stick. Now, the next point I want to make is that the commandment to keep the Sabbath day was given to the nation of Israel. That's important. It was given to the nation of Israel. It's mentioned the first time over in Exodus chapter 16. Beginning at verse 23. Exodus 16, 23. And he said unto them, This is that which the Lord hath said, Tomorrow is the rest of the holy Sabbath unto the Lord. Bake that which ye will bake today, and seeth that ye will seethe, and that which remaineth over lay up for you to be kept until the morning. And they laid it up till the morning, as Moses bade, and it did not stink, neither was there any worm therein. Now this is an interesting thing about the manna. We're talking about the manna again. If you were to go gather enough manna for that day, so that the day arises, you go out, you pick up what it is, and it was like, I don't know, bread. It was like honey, probably like those really good honey biscuit things, you know. So you go grab those and take them home, and that's what you eat that day. Now, if you kept it the next day, it was rotten, and it was full of worms, and it stank, okay? Except on this day, when you would gather it the day before the Sabbath, it wouldn't rot. So if you were greedy and went out and got too much, it would just go bad anyway. So it didn't make any sense to get more than you needed. You get enough. Except on the 6th day of the week, you go collect enough for both days, and it would be preserved until the next day. So that's what he's talking about here. In verse 25, and Moses said, Eat that today, for today is the Sabbath unto the Lord. Today you shall not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the 7th day, which is the Sabbath, in it there shall be none. And it came to pass that there went out some of the people on the 7th day for to gather, and they found none. And the Lord said unto Moses, How long refuse ye to keep my commandments and my laws? See, for that the Lord hath given you the Sabbath, therefore he giveth you on the 6th day the bread for 2 days. Abide ye, and every man in his place. Let no man go out of his place on the 7th day. So the people rested on the 7th day. Okay? And one of the things I want you to notice, on the 6th day they're to gather the bread for 2 days. In verse 29, I want you to notice what it says. See, for that the Lord hath given you, Israel, the Sabbath. He gave it to Israel. And that's an important point. And although some people violated the Sabbath at this time, notice there was no death penalty attached to this. They didn't stone them. The people that went out looking for it on the Sabbath day, they didn't get stoned. God told them, get back in your house and stay there. But there was no death penalty at this time. That didn't come about until Sinai, when God gave Moses the law. Prior to this time, there's no mention anywhere of anyone being commanded to observe a Sabbath day. And now look at what it says of the covenant of the Ten Commandments over in Deuteronomy chapter 5. Deuteronomy chapter 5, beginning at verse 1. And Moses called all Israel and said unto them, Hear, O Israel, the statutes and judgments which I speak in your ears this day, that ye may learn them and keep and do them. Notice who he's talking to. He's talking to the nation of Israel. Just like when we read the letters over in the New Testament that Paul wrote to the various churches, it's important to know who it is that he's writing to at the time that he's writing so that you can see what he's saying. He's writing to churches, right? Who are in churches? Well, believers. So the letters are written to believers. That's one of the main arguments against the idea that the Bible's an instruction book on how to get eternally saved. Because all the instructions are written to people that are already eternally saved. And they're not telling you how to get eternally saved, they're telling you how to get temporally saved and how you already got eternally saved. Okay? So Moses is speaking to the nation of Israel. That's extremely important. Called all Israel and said unto them, Hear, O Israel, the statutes and judgments which I speak in your ears this day, that ye may learn them and keep and do them. The Lord our God made a covenant with us in Horeb. The Lord made not this covenant with our fathers, but with us, even us who are all of us here alive this day. The Lord talked with you face to face in the mount out of the midst of the fire. I stood between the Lord and you at that time to show you the word of the Lord, for ye were afraid by reason of the fire and went not up into the mount, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage. Thou shalt have none other gods before me. Thou shalt not make any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the waters beneath the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself unto them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. I want to jump off here for just a second. You think it's an act of taking the name of the Lord thy God in vain when you put his name on a church and teach false doctrine? Like the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Church of Christ, or the Church of God, or the Assemblies of God, or any of those others that teach false doctrine. That is a breaking of this commandment, folks. That's the one people seem to ignore. They say, well, you can't use his name in vain by using it. Well, obviously, but you want to teach false doctrine and use his name to advertise it, you're taking his name in vain, whether you realize it or not, and he will not hold you guiltless. Verse 12, keep the Sabbath day. Who's he talking to again? The nation of Israel. Keep the Sabbath day to sanctify it as the Lord thy God hath commanded thee. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thine ox, nor thine ass, nor any of thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates, that thy manservant and thy maidservant may rest as well as thou. And remember that thou wast a servant in the land of Egypt, and that the Lord thy God brought thee out thence through a mighty hand and by a stretched out arm. Therefore the Lord thy God commanded thee to keep the Sabbath day. Honor thy father and thy mother as the Lord thy God hath commanded thee, that thy days may be prolonged, and that it may go well with thee in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill. And that word kill, by the way, I know liberals love to jump on this one. Well, you can't very well have the death penalty if you can't kill. And yet you tell people to stone people, so the Bible's full of contradictions. That word comes from the Hebrew word murder. It's the Hebrew word, thou shalt not murder, which is the taking of a life, the illegal taking of a life with malice aforethought. That's different than killing because you're told to, okay? Neither shalt thou commit adultery, neither shalt thou steal, neither shalt thou bear false witness against thy neighbor. Neither shalt thou desire thy neighbor's wife, neither shalt thou covet thy neighbor's wife, his field, or his manservant, or his maidservant, his ox, or his ass, or anything that is thy neighbor's. I got to tell you a funny story, and I'm going to blame it on Pastor Mott because he's the one that said it. Somebody once asked him, show me a verse in the Bible that teaches against homosexuality, and he referred to that one right there. Shall not covet another man's donkey. These words the Lord spake unto all your assembly in the mount, out of the midst of the fire, of the cloud, and of the thick darkness, with a great voice. And he added no more, and he wrote them in 2 tables of stone, and delivered them unto me. And it came to pass, when ye heard the voice out of the midst of the darkness, for the mountain did burn with fire, that ye came near unto me, even all the heads of your tribes and your elders. And ye said, behold, the Lord our God has showed us his glory and his greatness, and we have heard his voice out of the midst of the fire. We have seen this day that God doth talk with man, and he liveth. Now therefore, why should we die? For this great fire will consume us. If we hear the voice of the Lord our God any more, then we shall die. For who is there of all flesh that hath heard the voice of the living God speaking out of the midst of the fire as we have, and lived? Go thou near and hear all the Lord our God shall say, and speak thou unto us all that the Lord our God shall speak unto thee, and we will hear it and do it. And the Lord heard the voice of your words when you spake unto me. And the Lord said unto me, I have heard the voice of the words of this people, which they have spoken unto thee, and they have said, and they have well said that they have spoken. Oh, that there were such an heart in them that they would fear me and keep all my commandments always, that it might be well with them and with their children forever. Go say to them, get you into your tents again. Now that's those 10 commandments, and then they were given to Israel, and that's an important point to understand. And remember that one of these commandments is a commandment to observe the 7th-day Sabbath. And it's addressed to all Israel. The covenant was made with us at Horeb. In Deuteronomy chapter 5 and verse 3, it says, the Lord made not this covenant with our fathers, but with us, even us, who are all here alive this day. So these commandments were given to the nation of Israel. The Sabbath was given to Israel for 2 reasons. Number 1, they were to rest on the 7th day of the week because God rested on that day. And we're told that in Exodus chapter 20. Beginning at verse 10. But the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is that in them is, and rested the 7th day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Okay, so that's one reason. And over in Genesis chapter 2, let's flip over there. Genesis chapter 2. Verses 1 through 3. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the 7th day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. God rested on the seventh day, so one of the reasons he gave the Sabbath to Israel was for them to also rest on the seventh day. That was one of the reasons. This was the seventh day of the week, and it set a pattern for the Jews to observe the seventh day of the week as a Sabbath. So, for those that then want to take the fourth commandment, the one that says to keep the Sabbath, and change it to Sunday, remember we had the first group that says the Sabbath is still in effect. Then we have the second group that say that, well, they just changed it to Sunday, so now Sunday is a Sabbath. Remember, that was number 2 at the very beginning of this study when I was outlining the 3 different ways of looking at this. Well, clearly that negates that, because he didn't rest on the first day of the week. He rested on the seventh day of the week. And he gave them the Sabbath because he rested on the seventh day of the week. You can't then just change it and make it the first day of the week. We don't have a verse for that. So that negates that one. And again, the folks that teach that, do they stone you if you work on Sunday? No. So again, they want to transfer the part of the law they like and ignore the part that they don't want to have to deal with. Okay? So they err that maintain that the fourth commandment allows for an observance on the first day of the week as a Sabbath day. Now, it allows for worship on the first day of the week, or the second day of the week, or the third day of the week, or any day of the week that you want to have it in reality, and we'll see that when we finally finish with this study. But to say that it has to be on the first day of the week and can be no other day of the week, and that is now the Sabbath, you're ignoring all of the other rules of the Sabbath. Because I got a feeling that most of those folks are going to cook something to eat tonight. They're not going to eat cold leftovers from yesterday. They'll probably gather a stick or two. But there were no commandments that were given to men with regard to the seventh day until Moses came along. Now, God had people rest, but all the rest of that stuff came through Moses and came to the nation of Israel. So that's one of the things. They were also to rest on the seventh day because God had delivered them from servitude in the land of Egypt. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 5 and verse 15 again. And remember that thou wast a servant in the land of Egypt, and that the Lord thy God brought thee out thence through a mighty hand and by a stretched out arm. Therefore the Lord thy God commanded thee to keep the Sabbath day. They were in servitude under Egypt. God brought them out so that they could rest, so they could have a day of rest. God's service was very different from the rigorous servitude that they had in Egypt. Look at Exodus chapter 1. Beginning at verse 13. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. I was just thinking of the movie, The 10 Commandments, because that's at the very beginning of the movie, but I don't have the voice of Charlton Heston or whoever it was that read that. Now, this is important. This sign of the Sabbath being given because God had rescued them from Egypt was never given to any other nation. God never delivered any other nation from Egypt, from servitude in Egypt. And that's one of the reasons that God gave them the Sabbath, to remember that they had been slaves in Egypt and he delivered them from it. And that was one of the main reasons of the Sabbath. So you were to rest on the Sabbath day because you're no longer a servant to the Pharaoh. You can rest and you can remember what God did for you to deliver you from the world of Egypt. And that was the main purpose of the Sabbath. God never did that for Ethiopians. He never did that for South Americans. He never delivered Mexico from service in Egypt. He only did it for Israel. So he gave the Sabbath to Israel. And those were some of the reasons for it. The sign was given that they might know that it was the Lord that sanctified them. And Israel's observance of the Sabbath days signified that God had set them apart from all other nations as his people. It was for them. As long as they were on the earth, the Sabbath was given for them, to them. Had the Sabbath had been given to all other nations, it wouldn't have this significance, would it? It would lose its meaning. I mean, I don't know about you, but I know none of my family members that I can remember were ever in servitude in Egypt and brought out through miraculous acts in order to be able to be free. We weren't, but the Jews were. And this is interesting. There's an interesting point. We're getting pretty close to closing up for this morning, but you know, while God judged Israel for not keeping the Sabbath day, did you know he never judged any other nation? He never judged Gentiles for not keeping the Sabbath. Not once. He never judged them. The Romans had no problem working on the Sabbath day. They were the ones that were standing guard over the tomb. They weren't punished because they broke the Sabbath. Only the Jews were. Look at Nehemiah chapter 13. Again, it's over in the historical books after Chronicles, then you've got Ezra and then Nehemiah. For some reason, my brain always wants to flip back to the back of the Old Testament and look and hunt for it in the prophets, and it's not over there. Nehemiah chapter 13, beginning at verse 15. In those days saw I in Judah some treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in sheaves and lading asses, as also wine, grapes, and figs, and all manner of burdens, which they brought into Jerusalem on the Sabbath day. And I testified against them in the day wherein they sold victuals. There dwelt men of Tyre also therein, which brought fish, and all manner of ware, and sold on the Sabbath unto the children of Judah and in Jerusalem. Then I contended with the nobles of Judah, and said unto them, What evil thing is this that ye do, and profane the Sabbath day? Did not your fathers thus, and did not our God bring all this evil upon us and upon this city? Yet ye bring more wrath upon Israel by profaning the Sabbath. And it came to pass that when the gates of Jerusalem began to be dark before the Sabbath, I commanded that the gates should be shut, and charged that they should not be opened till after the Sabbath. And some of my servants set I at the gates, that there should be no burden be brought in on the Sabbath days. So the merchants and sellers of all kind of ware lodged without Jerusalem once or twice. Then I testified against them, and said unto them, Why lodge ye about the wall, If you do so again, I will lay hands on you. From the time forth came they no more on the Sabbath. Okay, so there were people, Gentiles, that were working on the Sabbath. Nehemiah didn't like it, but God didn't judge them. Now, look also in Jeremiah chapter 17. This is in the prophets. And we'll begin at verse 20. And say unto them, hear ye the word of the Lord, ye kings of Judah and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem that enter in by these gates. Thus saith the Lord, take heed to yourselves and bear no burden on the Sabbath day, nor bring it in by the gates of Jerusalem, neither carry forth a burden out of your houses on the Sabbath day, neither do ye any work, but hallow ye the Sabbath day as I commanded your fathers. But they obeyed not, neither inclined their ear, but made their necks stiff, that they might not hear nor receive instruction. And it shall come to pass, if ye diligently hearken unto me, saith the Lord, to bring in no burden through the gates of this city on the Sabbath, but hallow the Sabbath day to do no work therein, then shall there enter into the gates of this city kings and princes, sitting upon the throne of David, riding in chariots and on horses, they and their princes, and the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and this city shall remain forever. And they shall come from the cities of Judah and from the places about Jerusalem, and from the land of Benjamin, and from the plain, and from the mountains, and from the south, bringing burnt offerings and sacrifices, and meat offerings and incense, and bringing sacrifices of praise unto the house of the Lord. But if ye will not hearken unto me, to hallow the Sabbath day, and not to bear a burden, even entering in at the gates of Jerusalem on the Sabbath day, then will I kindle a fire in the gates thereof, and it shall devour the places of Jerusalem, and it shall not be quenched. Okay? So, the point being, don't bring the stuff into my city on the Sabbath. Don't cause my people to break the Sabbath. And I'll leave you alone. No nation was ever judged for keeping the Sabbath in Assyria. The Assyrians were never judged for that, for not keeping the Sabbath. The Romans weren't judged for it. The Egyptians weren't judged for it. But don't bring it into my church. Don't bring that stuff in here. If you do, then there will be judgment. Not because you're breaking the Sabbath, but because you're causing my people to break the Sabbath. Does that make sense? And finally, the Sabbath day was a distinctive feature of the law of Moses that was given to Israel at Mount Sinai, and it was not given to the nations at large. I got two passages for you. Psalm 147, verses 19 and 20. He showeth his word unto Jacob, his statutes and his judgments unto Israel. He hath not dealt so with any nation, and as for his judgments, they have not known them. Praise ye the Lord. He gave the statutes to Israel. Now, I'm going to get ahead of myself here a little bit because we're running out of time, and I'm not going to get there this morning. I don't want you to walk out the door going, well, what about all these other things that we're not allowed to do that were in the law of Moses? We'll deal with that next week. It comes down to this. Anything that was codified in the New Testament that was in the law of Moses, you are to observe. Okay? And there's a big long list of stuff that we're not allowed to be involved in. I've done that, and if anybody wants this, if you just send me an email and I'll send you a copy of it. There's a list of 53 different sins for which you can be excluded from the church if you get yourself involved in them. Now, some of them are a one-time and done, and you're out. Some of them are a lifestyle type of an issue. And it's pretty self-explanatory which are which, but there's a list of 53 of them in there. You know what's not in there? The Sabbath. You cannot be excluded from the church for not observing the Sabbath. Now, you can be excluded from the church for forsaking the assembly, but not for observing the Sabbath. It's not in there. Now look at Romans chapter 9 and verse 4. Paul says, who are Israelites, referring to his ancestry, to whom pertaineth the adoption and the glory and the covenants and the giving of the law and the service of God and the promises. Israel was God's church in the Old Testament day. The church was reformed when Christ came, set up a completely different system, and then 40 years later, the nation of Israel ceased to exist. They were run off the land in Jerusalem and dispersed into all the nations of the world, thus finishing that chapter. And with them went the Sabbath. Now, next week we we'll pick up with this, because another point that sometimes people try to make is the argument that the Ten Commandments are the moral law that are binding upon the entire human race. I want to answer that, because where they go with that is, again, that since the Ten Commandments are binding on the human race, then that means that the Sabbath, which is one of the Ten Commandments, is binding on the entire human race as well. And I want to go ahead and refute that next week and cover some more points. And hopefully I'll be able to finish this up next week. But anyway, I hope that this has been helpful for you. And let's stand and be dismissed in prayer.